Yo, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. I'm Patrick, and I am joined by a new guest, an old friend, my buddy Mike Rosen. Mike, what's up, man?
How are you, Patrick? Long time, first time.
Yeah, I'm good. So Mike is an old high school buddy of mine, and he pinged me on Facebook and he told me he listened to the show, and I was like, are you kidding me? And I was super flattered, honored, and good to have you on.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's a great show, and ever since I started listening, I think around the lottery episode, I haven't missed one since. So it's been great.
Awesome. Yeah, no. So I ask every guest, and I will ask you as well about your Warriors fandom. So tell me what it was like growing up as a Warriors fan and how it's been over the last 20 some odd years.
Exactly. We're showing our age. So, so like you, Patrick, I grew up in the Bay Area, grew up in Berkeley. And in the 80s was when I sort of came of age sports wise. And when it comes to the Warriors, my first memory was the Sleepy Floyd 50-point game, 50 piece he dropped on the Lakers. Of course, we lost that series, but and from that point forward, I think I hated the Lakers with a passion. Still do. But then we moved into sort of a golden period in the late 80s with Run TMC, and then even into the early 90s, Billy Owens and the C Webb era. And then I graduated high school in the mid 90s, I think right around when we traded Weber to the Bullets, now the Wizards, for Tom Gugliotta, one of the moves that shall live in infamy. Over that time, I still kept up with the Warriors. Not that there was much to be enthusiastic about, but right around 2014, my family and I moved from San Diego out to Israel, where we live now. And that happened to coincide with sort of the big run that the team went on, and 3 championships in 5 years, et cetera. And it's a little bit harder, as you might imagine, to follow the team out here, just because of the time difference. We're 10 hours ahead of the West Coast. So the West Coast games, the home games, start at 5 a.m. here and finish around 7:30 a.m. And a game like tonight's game with the Wolves starts here at 3 a.m. and just finished now at 5:30 in the morning. So a little bit tougher, but it's for the true diehards, and it's been great keeping up with the team. It makes me feel connected.
Wow, man. No, I super appreciate you getting up early and being on the show. And I know we've been trying to connect and get this going. So I'm excited to hear some of your takes. I haven't heard any of your basketball takes in like 20 years plus. So
it's been a minute.
I mean, let's just get into it, man. So the Warriors got beat down by the Wolves 119-99. What were your impressions, takeaways?
Well, it would have been nice to get this one just to even out the road trip and make it 2-2. That would have been good, just to come away with the W, no matter how we did it. Going into the game, of course, we were just down manpower in a huge way. No Steph, no Draymond, no GP2. But the Warriors actually, I thought, fought really well through about 2.5 quarters. Toward the end of the third, things started getting a little bit hairy, and then the fourth was just sort of blowout time. But they showed some real heart in the third quarter, so that was encouraging. Still, at the end of the day, it's a loss that I think we were expecting. You don't want to end the trip like that, but it'll be good to be getting home and hopefully get Steph back and get back on track.
I mean, now that the Warriors are a little bit wounded and they're down some dudes, you could tell that the Wolves wanted this one. They wanted to jump on them, especially after the smackdown that they got in San Francisco, where Wiggins went off. I respect the fact that the Warriors fought back, and I think like the news that Draymond is going to be out for at least another 2 weeks, and it's just a reevaluation in 2 weeks is kind of a sobering thought. I've talked about this before, and we've seen what the Warriors are like without Steph. We've seen what the Warriors are like without Clay. Now for legitimately an extended period, we're going to see what they're like without Draymond. And I've felt that in a way that, I mean, all those guys are irreplaceable, but him in particular, he's somebody that does so much stuff that doesn't show up on the stat sheet, stuff that happens behind the scenes in the locker room during practices on the bench. What do you think the Warriors should do to try to mitigate that, at least while he's out for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, Draymond is not only is he the defensive glue, he's the offensive glue in so many ways. And, he was on track for a DPOY campaign. And I think he probably would have to say up until he got injured, at least was leading in that area. And it's just tough. Certainly on the defensive side, you see it today, giving up 119 points to the Wolves. But offensively as well, he's the fulcrum. Everything runs through him. And to see us just kind of continue to struggle to really get open shots and make open shots without him there is going to be tough. I was listening as I also do to the Athletic podcast, and
Mhm.
I think it was Marcus Thompson was saying, in some ways, if Draymond's absence isn't too long, it could actually be good for the team because Draymond's no spring chicken. He's 31, 32. He needs some rest, and to get him fresh for a playoff run is really important, and that's definitely true. But we don't want to sacrifice playoff seeding as well during the regular season. We want to get in a good rhythm. So, I think a couple games would have been something that we could have dealt with, but I think 2 weeks now and possibly more, maybe even probably more, it's going to be tough.
And it's already been a week, right? This whole road trip has been without Draymond, and they ended up 1-3. And I totally get the rest thing, right? Like, I'm like, hey, Steph's hand, as long as it's not serious, this counts as rest to me. But my concern is the fact that it went from a calf to a back issue. We all know that anything having to do with the back is an issue, especially a guy like Draymond, who is 6'6", but plays so many bigger dudes and bangs and pounds so much beneath the basket that's got to be a concern. And a lot of the things that I've said throughout the season are, I mean, these are all very pragmatic, practical things. The goals are having as good of a record as you can heading to the playoffs, and then also getting some of these newer guys like Otto Porter Jr. and some of the younger guys like Kuminga and Jordan Poole acclimated to these high pressure games and these high leverage situations and big crowds and spotlights and all that stuff. But then also being as healthy as possible, especially for your key dudes. And this is the first thing this season where it's like, okay, this puts health in jeopardy to some extent. And I think obviously we'll know more in maybe the coming days. I don't know. They might play it really, really close to the vest, but I'll favor health over fighting for that one seed personally.
Absolutely. And that the key for the team, I think, at this stage is to work on their health, to work on developing the young players, to reintegrate Clay into the team, and to get everyone together. Now, of course, part of the challenge of reintegrating is, you kind of need to have Draymond in there to make that happen. But I think Steph said it well a couple after, I think it was the Milwaukee game or maybe the game before that. But he said, this is a quote I got from one of his post game interviews. He said, "We always talked about breaking the season into three parts. And this is the period where we have to make those adjustments, get better, stay patient, get everybody comfortable with our new chemistry. The first part was the first third of the season without Clay. Now we're in this phase that he's talking about. And then he said, then the playoff push close to the All-Star break, right? So there's sort of this period that's a little bit more free flowing now. And again, you hate to see Draymond out of it, but the team's just gotta kind of rally and do what it can together. And it was encouraging to see Clay hit some big threes tonight. He had one that got wiped away inexplicably because his foot was on the line, that they took points off the board, which just kind of stank. But it's great to see him coming in, and it's great to see the energy of the young guys. Seeing Poole every game, he's been up and down, but especially tonight, stepping up and stepping in for Steph, and then Kuminga. We could do it. You could do a whole pod. I know you've done several pods on Kuminga and his emergence. He's just been a revelation. It's been amazing to watch him.
I think with this team, I mean, the thing that I, as a fan, like to lean on is like the confidence that you have in guys like Kerr, in Steph, and Clay, and Draymond, and just Andre having been there. I feel like, there's half the season left, and they'll get to a point where they know what they need the other guys to do. They know how far they need to get them. And hopefully by the time Draymond comes back, whenever that is, no one else falls out. I'd love to see him and Clay actually play a game together. you know?
Absolutely. To see them get back on the court together. I mean, it was, I thought it was very touching how Draymond, even though he knew he wasn't going to play in that first game back, he just got on the court for the opening tip and then took himself out of the game when Clay first joined. But, obviously that's not really engaging and playing together. So to see them kind of fit and work it out, that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. I was hoping that we would see another big game from Andrew Wiggins. We saw an okay game. Kuminga, Steve Kerr said he's going to get a lot more minutes, especially with Draymond out, which I think is great. What did you see from him tonight? And what are your impressions of him overall? Who does he remind you of in the past and the present?
Well, let me start with Wiggins since you raised him first. So, he obviously he had that monster game against the Wolves the first time that we played him this season, and his numbers were he's been a career 20-point a game shooter basically, uh, but against the Wolves since he's been on the Warriors he's been up to 26 points per game. Tonight, not so much. I think he finished with 12. And the first half he was 0 for everything from the field and I think 2 for 4 from the line. So in the first half he lacked a lot of aggressiveness. He went on a nice run in the third quarter, which was great to see. I think he scored 8 points in a row for the team,
Mm-hmm.
and it looked like he was kind of getting his mojo back. And then I think he missed a 3-pointer, and things just kind of went not exactly downhill, but just kind of petered out after that. And that was a little disappointing, because you like to think he gets up for these big games, but not so much. And this was a game really we could have used him to step up. So hopefully he'll keep that aggressiveness going and find his way. But speaking of aggressiveness, man, Kuminga, he can seems like he can score from anywhere on the court. And you just see him coming down the court, coast to coast, with a full head of steam. Reminds me, I don't know, bits of Giannis, bits of KD, a little bit of, maybe even Brandon Ingram, but with so much more strength and power coming at you, and just the confidence. It seems like every game he's growing in that, and learning how to channel it too, right? I mean, I think the knock on him, and actually the first time I think I ever heard his name, by the way, was when you and maybe it was Harem or Vu Bang or one of you guys did
Yeah.
the pre-lottery or pre-draft pod about him. Is that he's very raw. He's an incredible athlete, but he's unpolished and needs to kind of come into form. And that's definitely true. But it does seem like every game and every single rep that he gets when he gets out there, he's just getting better and better and smoother and smoother. And it's still going to take a while, but it's the trajectory is clear.
One thing I always like to clarify in terms of the rawness that people talk about, right? It's like when some people say raw, some people, at least me, I think of like a Donald Foyle, right? To go way back, right? Like that dude was raw, but that dude was like an old rookie who didn't know how to play basketball at all and just wasn't very coordinated and skilled. Bless his heart. Seems like a nice dude from what
Yeah.
I can remember. But Kaminga, I mean, he's not that raw, right? Like he's raw in the sense that he needs to be refined, but he always had skill and he has a lot of confidence, which I really, really appreciate seeing, especially on this team. And he has that so far, he has those intangibles, that it factor that can really, I mean, we've all seen it now and people are hyping him up now, like after that 25-point game in Chicago, but he can get his shot off pretty much whenever he wants. Like it may not be the jumper every time, but he can get a reasonable shot off somehow, some way. I want to ask you, you mentioned KD. What reminds you of Kevin Durant in his game?
So I think it's that bucket getting attitude more than
Mm.
anything, right? There's certainly something aesthetically a little bit about the way he glides toward the basket and his exceptional body control, the way that he's able to adjust his angles and especially his touch near the rim. But more than that, I just think it's, that was the great luxury of having KD, one of the greatest scorers to ever play the game. And we were blessed to have him for 3 years on the team, was that when things bogged down, you could just toss him the ball and say, "Go get a bucket," and more often than not, he would. And Kuminga's not there yet by any means, but he has that vibe to him, and I think it's starting to show its way in the numbers as well.
I love watching Kuminga on defense because I enjoy seeing all the different guys that he guards and how he guards them. I saw him guarding Vanderbilt, Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, and Jaden McDaniels. In terms of staying in front of people, you watch for those moments where Anthony Edwards or D'Angelo Russell try to drive on him and he forces them to pass the ball. Maybe he gets a little bit of help, but he stays with them enough, gets in front of them enough. He doesn't get blown by. And those things are huge to me because then you flip it around and he bangs with like the big men underneath. That's a rarity that obviously we've only really seen on the Warriors with Draymond Green. And I'm not comparing him like directly, but there are elements in his defensive ability, that flexibility, that versatility. We've seen him guard DeMar DeRozan. We've seen him guard like point guards. And I mean, as much as his offense, his defense is what gets me kind of fired up, especially as a 19-year-old rookie. How many 19-year-old rookies have you seen that can legitimately do that on the regular?
I think you said it exactly right. It's that versatility and that flexibility. He can honestly guard 1 through 5 on any team, and he has. I mean, tonight he was banging down there with Cat on some of those plays, and we saw he was guarding D'Lo as well, and we saw, I think one of his big breakout games when he hit the main stage was that Christmas Day game in Phoenix when he guarded CP3, and
Yeah.
he did a great job, right? I mean, he kind of got postered and put on skates at the end of the first half with that shot that Chris Paul made, but the second half he didn't get daunted by that. He came back and guarded him incredibly tough and incredibly tight, and I think that's right. The way that he can switch his hips, shift his orientation depending where the player's going. He's a marvel at being able to get to guard those guys who are little and who are big. So it's just exciting. I think there's just great positive growth coming for him.
Looking ahead at the schedule, let's just look, for the next 2 weeks, since that's when Draymond is supposed to get reevaluated. So let me just run down this. So, like, they get Detroit at home, Pacers at home, Rockets at home, Jazz at home, Dallas at home, these same Timberwolves at home, and then Brooklyn. And obviously, Kevin Durant is not going to play because he has a knee sprain. And then they get Houston. They play in Houston on the 31st. That's not bad. You know what I mean? Like, that's actually a pretty favorable schedule for the most part,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you look at Brooklyn as wounded, you look at Minnesota, Houston, Indiana, Detroit, those are all gettable games. I don't know. Have they said when Steph is coming back? Is he going to come back the next game, or is he sitting out for a while?
They haven't, and they haven't said one way or the other. I'm hoping that it'll be in time for Detroit, but truth is, probably we could afford to rest him for Detroit, Indiana, maybe even Houston. But if we don't have him back by the time the Jazz roll in, I think it'll be tough. Even though I sort of feel like the last time we played the Jazz, we just kind of figured them out.
Mm-hmm.
I think, but that's one thing that the Warriors, and I got to give credit to Steve Kerr for a lot of that, is when you play series against these teams, we may drop one or two in a 7-game series, but at some point we sort of figure it out. But looking at this 7-game homestand coming up, I would expect and hope that we could win at least 5 of those games out of the 7. Dallas and Utah maybe would give us some trouble, and who knows if it doesn't sound like KD is going to be back in time for the Brooklyn game. Um, by the way, do you know one thing I was curious about? If you know, Patrick, would Kyrie be able to play in Chase Center? I would assume not, right?
From what I recall during the whole Andrew Wiggins issue in the preseason, visiting players would be allowed to play, which doesn't make a lick of
Oh,
sense to me. But I could be wrong. I haven't looked it
okay.
up since the beginning of the season. But
That's so strange. Yeah, no, you may be right because I had heard in reading about his situation in Brooklyn that visiting players who play against the Nets who are not vaccinated can play, which again scientifically makes zero sense. And I don't know if you follow Ethan Strauss, but
Sure.
in his Substack he was writing about how it's just ridiculous, and it's time to let these guys play. It's with the way this Omicron is going, it just doesn't make sense. But anyway, if he's not playing on the 29th, we'll be happy,
Yeah.
but it would stink for him.
The NFL playoffs are here, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is kicking things off with a huge offer. Counting down to Super Bowl 56, new customers can get 56 to 1 odds on any wildcard team to win their game. Bet just $5 and win $280 in free bets if your team is victorious. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, you still have something to play for this wildcard weekend. Everyone can play for huge cash prizes with DraftKings Daily Fantasy Contests. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code TBPN, and get 56 to 1 odds on any NFL team. Bet just $5 and win $280 in free bets if your team wins. That's promo code TBPN this wildcard weekend at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
The only other thought that I wanted to share was I really thought that Kevon Looney just continued to demonstrate his resurgence this season and his importance to the team. He did I thought a really good job down low guarding Cat. He got on some plays and he fouled a bunch, but he looks strong and confident, and he comes in especially at a time like this with so many key players out. He has this sort of stabilizing influence on the team, and it's great to see. I think he had double-digit rebounds tonight, and he had a couple nice touch plays in the basket. So he's doing a good job, at least keeping the seat warm for our 7-foot big man when he finally gets his way back onto the team. But we need every rebound, every point we can get from Looney at this point.
Yeah, I wonder who's going to be back first, Wiseman or Draymond. I hope it's Draymond because, I'm not projecting Wiseman to come back until after the All-Star game at this point with all the latest news about his second cleanup surgery in December.
Yeah.
But yeah, Looney is a guy that I love. I mean, sometimes it's frustrating, right? Because like the pump fake, getting swatted. But I give that guy props because he keeps trying. He does well against these bigger, stronger, less athletic dudes, right? I mean, anyone's going to get burned by Giannis, but he in particular just got worked. But against Karl Anthony Towns, I feel like, he knows how to play a dude like that because he is tough, because he can body Towns. And, that's a credit to Looney for being an undersized center and taking on every single challenge.
Absolutely.
The last thing I'll say about this game is I keep saying this since the beginning of the season. Kuminga is going to live at the free throw line. He's going to be one of those dudes. 6 for 10. His shot is not broken. He's just off a little bit. He doesn't miss left or right. He misses short or long. So I feel like by next season, hopefully by the end of this season, he'll get that up a little bit, that percentage up a little bit higher.
Yeah, even 7 or 8 out of 10, we'll take. 6 is not going to cut it, but if he could get to 7 or 8, I mean, if he gets to 8, then he'll be golden. 80% free throw shooting would be great.
I wanted to ask you one last thing before I let you go. You had told me that you were at the 2019 Game 6 finals where Clay tore his ACL. I still hate Danny Green.
So do I. Join the club.
But I actually haven't talked to anyone who was actually there. I have talked to tons of people. Like I'm on a group text with a bunch of guys, and we were texting throughout that whole thing, and we were privy to all the reports. And I'm sure you guys were too. Twitter was around and all that stuff. You guys were probably keeping tabs as much as we were. But just tell me really quickly, like what that was like, what that experience was like, because I can't imagine anything as intense.
It was probably the most intense and emotional sporting experience, spectating experience I've ever had in my life and probably ever will. So just again, to kind of keep in mind, we live in Israel, and my son Ozzy had just was about to have his bar mitzvah. So for his bar mitzvah present, we went out to visit my family in California, and we got tickets for Game 6. And he's a tremendous, huge Dubs fan, down to to the sneakers of all the different players. No, not the Antas, not the Clay Antas, but he went with every Steph shoe, every KD shoe, and it meant a lot to him, and it meant a lot to me to take him to Oracle for the very, very last game. And it was an amazing game. It was obviously extremely disappointing at the end, and it's very painful to watch your team fail at the end and to see another team celebrate on your home court. But the moment that I will never forget was after Clay went into the locker room when he first got injured and had been fouled, and he came walking out of that tunnel to shoot his free throws, the last two shots that he would take, the last two moments he'd be on the court for 2.5 years until just last week. And the emotion in the crowd, the energy, the excitement of him coming out there, hobbling along on that leg and burying those two free throws, which we needed. We needed every one of those points and still came up short. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. And it was just incredible to be a part of that.
When did you find out that it was an ACL? Were there murmurs going around? Were people like saying stuff, going on Twitter, going on social, like hearing this, that, the other? Was there, a lot of awareness?
There was murmurings going around. You know what it's like sometimes in these arenas where there's just not great cell service, so everyone's trying to refresh Twitter and whatever, and it's just not working. You knew it was bad, though. You just knew it was bad when he had to leave the game. You knew something was not great. But I think it was only when I got out of the stadium did I know for sure that he had torn the ACL and would be out for who knows how long. But you just got the sense that even if we had fought back and won the game and taken it to Game 7 in Toronto, it would have been a real uphill fight to win that game with just Steph, right? No KD, no Clay. But you know what? It was there was something special about being in that crowd where no one really knew exactly what was going on. We just knew that we had to cheer our hardest for the team and give them one last push, and we did our best.
Yeah. I did a whole episode with Aram last year because he lives in Toronto and he had to deal with all the Raptors fans and everything. And if you haven't listened to it, that was before we did the lottery one, so you should listen to it. It's because I could just go off and talk more about that game and that series nonstop. But I will. I understand that it's like 6 a.m. over there where you are.
Oh, well, I'll definitely go listen to that one. That sounds great.
But man, thank you for coming on. It's awesome talking to you and getting your takes. I think it's safe to say your takes are still solid, man, after all these years.
I hope so. I've lost a couple miles on my fastball to mix metaphors, but no, it's great. And thanks for having me on. Keep up the great work with the podcast. Would love to join you again and go Dubs.
Awesome. Well, this has been another episode of the Oakland Warriors podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Patrick Epino, Epino, or at Oakland Warriors. Check us out at OaklandWarriors.com. And be sure to tell your fellow Warrior fan friends to tune in and listen. The Oakland Warriors podcast is produced by National Film Society and is a part of the Basketball Podcast Network. And if you're so inclined, please do leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify and or Apple Podcasts and say some nice stuff about us in a review. That's it. Music in this episode provided by Paper Sun. Special thanks to Paul Amardo for production support. See you next time, and go Dubs.